Okay, supposedly it's already live on YouTube. Can you confirm, Paul, if from your screen?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, perfect. Okay,
I am
supposedly it's already live.
right. Yeah, it's there.
Okay, thank you. Um, supposedly it's already live on YouTube. Can you confirm, Paul, if from your screen?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, perfect. Okay,
I am
supposedly it's already live.
right. Yeah, it's there.
Okay, thank you. Supposedly it's already live on YouTube. Can you confirm, Paul, if from your screen?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, perfect. Okay,
I am
Why is it playing over and over again in the background?
it's there. I think she's got to turn off the
supposedly it's already live.
Yeah, whoever's watching it on YouTube can mute that speaker.
Yeah.
So
from your. Okay, perfect.
we also, I think, can pause the recording until the meeting fully starts, if that makes it easier.
Yeah, I think that should have done it.
Can everybody see the screen?
Yes,
And it's in presenter view, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it looks just fine.
Good morning. For those of you who just logged in, we're just waiting for it to be 9. So everyone has logged in and we can start the meeting. Good morning, everyone. So we might have to wait a little bit. I only see 3 committee members. It has to be 4 to start, to have quorum and to start the meeting.
Morning, everyone. We're just trying to see if we can get a 4th committee member on, so please stand by.
Hey, everyone. Sorry I'm late.
Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning.
Hi, everyone. Can the committee members turn on their videos, please? We'll do introductions. All right. Thanks. Thanks everyone for joining. We've got a busy schedule this morning, so we'll get started. Just wanted to do introductions of the committee members. My name's Lainey Berry. I'm the Wildlife Program Manager representing Hawaii Department of Land and Natural Resources. I do not have anyone else in the room with me. Can we go to Michelle next?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Bogardos. I'm the Deputy Field Supervisor for the Pacific Islands Fish and Wildlife Office. It's good to see everybody here this morning. I do not have anybody in the room with me right now, but I do have staff popping in and out.
Thanks, Michelle. Jim?
Good morning, Jim Jacoby. I'm a co-representative for USGS DRD Pacific Island Ecosystems Research Center, and I'm here by myself.
Thanks. And Loyal?
Yeah, Loyal Merhoff. I'm an at-large ESRC member, and right now no one is in the room with me, although I expect somebody will come in to use their computer in a little while.
Okay, thanks. And we also have Bob.
Hey everybody, I'm Bob Reed. I'm the Deputy Director at USGS Pierce, and I'm backing up Jim and increasing my institutional knowledge, and I am by myself.
Okay, great, thank you. I don't think I missed anyone from the committee. No. Is there, and I just wanted to make sure, we've got the DOFA HCP online. Is there anyone in person from the committee? Just want to double check.
No.
Yep, okay, great, thank you.
Lainey, as a heads up, I've got Emma on standby for any questions that we may need to direct to her, but I'm not having her join the Zoom link unless we need her to.
Okay, thank you. And since we only have 4 committee members, if we lose one person, we will lose quorum. So please, committee members, if you need to step away, please, can you make sure there's someone else to fill in? Otherwise, we'll have to end the meeting.
Lainey, do we not have Lisa today?
No, we don't.
And Kawika, he's sick, so he won't be able to make it.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Item 1 is announcements.
So for announcements, let me turn on my screen. And let me introduce myself. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ESRC committee meeting for the annual review. My name is Mina Giral Perez. I'm the Protected Species Habitat Conservation Planning Associate with DOFA. And I will be facilitating this meeting. For announcements, I just wanted to say that Paul Ratley, who was our HCP coordinator, has now transitioned into a new position. And then I also wanted to let you know that around 12, that's when the lunch break will be. And also after every item, I will just be asking if anybody needs break, like a 5-minute break. So that's all the announcements I have.
Thank you, Mina. Anything else from any of the committee members?
Yeah, I'd like to request at our next meeting that we get an update on Pakini Nui, Lalamilo, and Pu'uvava. These are 3 proposals that have been a long time coming, and at some point we need to find out what the status of them are.
Okay, noted. Thank you, Jim. That will be because we have you mean the meeting after Wednesday? Yeah. Okay. Noted. Thank you.
And Lainey, this is Loyal. Could you add to that the back guidance?
Oh,
as an
yes.
update?
Sure. All right. Mina, do you want to lead us through the items, or do you want me to?
So in the agenda today, a status will be provided on 5 of the 6 active habitat conservation plans. We're gonna start with Kaheawa Wind Energy Facility from Maui, and it's gonna be presented by Jennifer Taylor. And then Kaheawa Wind Power 2, Oahe, Kahuku from Oahu, and Naslina Puama County from Oahu too. So with that, I think I can pass that along to Jennifer so she can start presenting.
Good morning, everyone. I'll just get my screen set up here. Okay. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Jenny Taylor, and I am a biologist and project manager with Tetra Tech. And I, along with my colleague Tom Snetzinger, will be presenting the Kaweawa wind projects, or the KWPs, on behalf of Brookfield Renewable Partners. And joining us from Brookfield this morning are Scott Rotman and John Kirby. Today, I will be presenting KWP1 and KWP2 together. And while both have separate HCPs and ITLs, there's an overlap of the wind project's mitigation and adaptive management and minimization actions. So in order to provide redundancy, I'll present these topics together towards the end of the presentation. But I'll present the post-construction monitoring and take summaries separately per project though. And this presentation includes the HCP implementation activities of FY 2022 and through September 30th of 2022, which includes Q1 of FY 2023. I was not able to get through all of the QA, QC, and subsequent analysis for Q2 in the time frame of getting ready to present. So while I have some of that information available about Q2 results, I don't have final information for modeled numbers. So we're just presenting through Q1 of FY 2023. So with that, I will jump into KWP1. Okay, KWP1 is owned and operated by the LLC, and the parent company is Brookfield Renewable. There's been no change of ownership in the past year. The project is comprised of 20 1.5 megawatt turbines, and it's operating under an HCP, which is approved in January of 2006. The ITP or ITL is ITL-8, which is also issued in 2006. Oh, it has a 20-year permit term. And the project has been operational since June of 2006. And there have been 2 minor amendments to date. In 2012, a reduction of seabird take limits was authorized. And then in 2016, the ITL was amended to clarify the bat take limit that was on the ITL. And so this minor amendment addressed adding the higher level of take of Hawaiian hoary bat identified in the HCP to the ITL itself. The project site is in West Maui. It's depicted over 2 tiles here, but the 20 turbines are in one long string, and they are along an elevational gradient on the hillside. So we have the 20 turbines, and we have an O&M building and a Met tower that are shared with KWP2. And this is also depicting our search areas and our acoustic monitoring locations. The HCP covers 4 species: the Hawaiian hoary bat, Hawaiian goose, Hawaiian petrel, and Newell shearwater. And this slide is showing the authorized level of take for each species and the tier that they are in. Again, the HCP was issued in 2006 and uses the terms baseline and higher level of take, but we've translated those to tier 1 and tier 2 just for uniformity with other projects. And the larger bolded text indicates the level of take for each species. So Hawaiian hoary bat is in tier 2, Hawaiian goose is in tier 1, Hawaiian petrel and Newell shearwater are both in tier 1. And regarding the total take authorization for the Hawaiian goose, 100 adult nene are currently provided for in the HCP. However, that number was not included on the 2016 amended ITL. Currently, the authorized amount is 60, which is the baseline level of take. So Brookfield has been working with the agencies to address the issue. We have discussed minor amendments to add the additional higher level of take, which is represented in the ITP. We are working with agencies on a second front for that particular issue, which is to reduce the overall authorized amount of take. And that brings us to the post-construction monitoring. So we have 2 monitoring programs on site, fatality monitoring and acoustic monitoring for bats. Our current strategy has been in place since April of 2015, and it involves weekly searches led by a canine team at all turbines. And the searched areas include cleared areas within 70-meter radius of a turbine. So this are roads and pads, and the pads areas are quite large. So it's, again, cleared areas within 70 meters of the turbine. In addition, we have bias correction trials that are run in association with canine searches. We also have vegetation management, where we maintain those cleared areas. We have a quarterly herbicide application and monthly weed whacking within the search plots to minimize the regrowth of vegetation. We also have a scavenger control program on site, which includes trapping every other week over a trap grid of 32 traps. And in FY 2022, we increased the number of traps in our trapping effort to address a reduction in bat surrogate carcass retention. We also have acoustic monitoring occurring at 5 ground-based detectors, which are distributed throughout the turbines and capture the elevational change of the turbines. And we do year-round monitoring for at those detectors. So that brings us to results of our monitoring that lead into the fatality estimation. So this slide is showing our bias correction results both for 2022 and Q1 of 2023. We have very strong searcher efficiency at the site, as expected with a canine team. And for our size classes of medium bird, which correct for seabirds, and large bird, which correct for the Hawaiian goose, we have a strong probability of persistence. It's a little lower for our bat surrogates, and the increase of our scavenger control program has occurred to address this issue, to bring it up, see if we can bring it up a little bit. And I'll talk about that a little bit further in KWP2. So it's very consistent in between the FY 2022 for bat surrogates and Q1 of FY 2023. And we are hoping to increase that in Q2 and Q3. And that brings me to a summary of take at the project. So this take is through Q1 2023. We have had take of 3 of the 4 covered species at KWP1. And the cumulative take through September 30th is 9 Hawaiian hoary bats, 26 nene, and 7 Hawaiian petrels. And these numbers are the observed direct take that feed into our modeling with evidence of absence software to determine the total estimated take. In the observed taken through September 30th in the time frame of reporting has been, we have not had any Hawaiian hoary bat nor Hawaiian petrels. We've had 1 Hawaiian goose, and we are currently modeling at 30 Hawaiian hoary bats, and this is at the 80% UCL and accounting for indirect take calculations. So 30 Hawaiian hoary bats, 51 Hawaiian goose, and 21 Hawaiian petrels. And this again represents the tier of take that we are in for each. And then in the same reporting time period, we have had take of 2 MBTA covered species, the white-tailed tropic bird and the northern mockingbird. The white-tailed tropic birds were in FY 2022, and the northern mockingbird was in Q1 of FY 2023. And our acoustic monitoring program. This slide is showing our results both cumulatively and through FY 2022. Q1 is not represented here. And this is, as previously mentioned, monitoring that has occurred across 5 ground-based detectors. In FY 2022, activity was detected on 9.5% of detector nights sampled, and that's similar to years past. And peak activity occurs during the post-lactation period, also similar to years past. And the annual detection rates in FY 2022 were actually lower than they were in FY 2021 by 3.9%, but this was not, this did not represent a statistically significant difference. And unique to this year, we saw a peak of activity in January. And again, that is unique to this year. The cause is unknown. We also observed this at KWP2, and potential correlations might include weather patterns, but we would need more data to provide any kind of context for interpretation. And overall, when the monitoring years are analyzed between 2015 and 2022, which cover all of the years that we have been using the SM2 detectors on site, we are seeing a significant increasing trend in the annual detection rates at the site. And before I go into KWP2's information, I'll just pause for any questions.
Jenny, this is Loyal. I had a couple questions.
Okay.
So can you go back to 2 slides? The first one being the one that shows the take levels.
This one?
The
The authorized take levels or the project or where we're modeling?
Authorized ones, the authorized ones.
Okay. Here we go.
Oops. So I'm unclear on the NENE. I would appreciate if you could go over it again for me on the potential minor amendment to reduce tier 2. You've got it because you said that it's currently at 60 and you're trying to get into tier 2. I didn't understand that. So
okay, my apologies. 60 is what has been authorized for tier 1. And that is currently what is on the ITL. The ITL has provisions for this higher level of take or tier 2 for each other species except for NENE. So the first front that we've been working with HCP staff on is to include a higher level of take for NENE on the ITL. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is what the amount of that higher level of take would be. And what we would like to see is, based on our projections and that we are 4 years between to the end of the permit term, we would like to bring down the upper level of 100 adults to a reduced amount. We have not determined that reduced amount yet. We have been talking to agencies about what that would look like. So to bring it more in line with where we are projecting our take to be at the end of the permit, as well as, provide provisions for unexpected circumstances. So those are the two fronts for the ITL, is the higher, is to add that higher level of take and to downwardly adjust it when it does get added. And I guess I will just call on committee members if that works for everybody. Or first, I should ask if that answered your question.
Kind of. I just need to think about it a little bit.
Okay. Well, maybe in the interim, I'll call on Jim.
Yes. Getting back to Nene. This is maybe more of a question for DOFA. I know in the past that the area above the site was used as a release area for Nene. Is that still the case?
Oh, go ahead, Mina.
No, I was gonna see if Lainey or Paul can answer that question.
Do you mean for the translocation?
Yeah, I know when we did a site visit many years ago, and it was talked about how the area above the site was used as a sort of a Nene release area, and that seemed to be sort of part of the reason why there's so many Nene in that area. Is that still the case? If it is, it doesn't make any sense possibly to keep that going, because again, I'm sort of alarmed at how many Nene have been taken by this project.
Yeah, I don't believe so. But
Jim, if I recall correctly from John Medeiros, it's no longer being used as a spot to release Nene, but it is still managed to support Nene in that broad general area.
Again, perhaps there should be some thought put into whether that should be continued to be maintained. I mean, I realize that it was, before this project came into being, it was a site that was used and managed for that. But again, I mean, DOFA and Fish and Wildlife did approve this as a project, and so perhaps maybe should consider not using it as an area to attract Nene, because it seems like you attract them and then they potentially are in danger. Anyway, something to consider, because again, I'm concerned that the Nene continue to be taken at a relatively high rate here.
Yes. And I will talk about avoidance and minimization measures that we've done on site to try to address that as well. And then Michelle, I see that you had a hand raised too.
Sorry, while we're on the Nene train, Jenny, regardless of whether we're talking about the 60 or 100 and the amendment process that would go around for that, regardless of all of that, I still see that the current take is at 51. And given the current rate of take, I would expect that something needs to get worked out pretty quickly, because we're quickly approaching that 60 threshold.
That's right. We are projecting that we will move into tier 2 within the permit term. So we have been working, I have a slide to address that, but we have been working with the agencies to identify additional mitigation in order to address our mitigation obligation. and working to avoid and to minimize conditions on site, which seem to be very favorable to Nene, because we do have a resident population on site as well.
So just for transparency's sake, I'll say that I am texting Emma just because I want to get a better sense of what the actual ITP and ITL says. Because if that tier 2, that switch from 60 to 100 is not correctly represented in the actual ITP and ITL, I think we've got, I don't know, I want to learn more about this. Maybe this isn't the venue to do it. But there's a big difference between adding a tier 2 versus a minor amendment.
The ITP does account for this, so it's really just an issue with the ITL.
Okay.
And then Tom, I'm wondering if you have anything that you'd like to add to the discussion.
Yeah, I was just going to highlight what you just said, that the ITP does allow for that higher take authorization into tier 2. And so it really is specifically an ITL issue that we're addressing with the potential increase into tier 2, but both agencies would obviously be involved in adjusting that downward. And we have had discussions with both DOFA and Fish and Wildlife Service about how that would be done, to ensure that we're all on the same page. We do recognize it's something that we need to address in the near future in order to get everything aligned.
Thanks.
The only other thing I would mention is just quickly regarding Jim's concern about the Hanaula site and what's going on up there. There is language in the HCP that sort of discusses this, but really requires that the project not impact the number or the population of Nene in the area associated with that Honolulu area. So we're sort of between a rock and a hard place, but definitely interested in doing anything that we can to further reduce Nene risk. I mean, we recognize it. It is difficult for us to avoid these impacts, and anything that we could do to reduce Nene's attraction to the site, I think would be beneficial.
I assume that you're going to present the mitigation update from KWP1 and KWP2 together after the update from KWP2.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And I would just add that the issues on site are the same for KWP2. However, the ITP and the ITL are clear.
So Jenny, for my second question, it has to do with the actual take chart, then I think the one you had on previously.
This one?
Yes. So on the observed take, the second column, so that is actually a year and a quarter, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And the Hawaiian goose was observed in January of last year, I believe, of 2022. So Q3 2022.
Okay, and your projections, the only species that would be looking at possibly going between tiers before the end of the permit period is going to be the Nene, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, I will move on to KWP2. Oh, whoop.
I'm sorry, can we just check to see if there's any questions or comments from members of the public?
Sure.
Miana, do we have anyone from the public who's wanting to ask questions?
So far, no comments.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so for KWP2 is also its own independent LLC with Brookfield Renewable as the parent company. And this wind project is comprised of 14 wind turbines that are 1.5 megawatts. The HCP was approved in January 2012 and operates under ITL 15 under over a 20-year permit. And this HCP was amended in November of 2019. The project has been operational since July of 2012. And the 2019 amendment included the additional take of 27 Hawaiian hoary bats to bring the total to 38, an additional take of 14 Hawaiian goose to bring the total to permitted total to 44. And this project site is continuing the string. It's also in West Maui, continuing the string of turbines so that the sum of both combined are 34 turbines that transcend the hillside in one long line. So again, moving from higher elevation to lower elevation by turbine number. And we also have 5 acoustic monitoring sites distributed throughout that elevational change. So this, similar to KWP1, we have the same suite of 4 covered species: Hawaiian hoary bat, Hawaiian goose, Hawaiian petrel, and Newell shearwater. And also I have bolded the text that shows the tier that we are in for each. And then the cumulative take is represented by the amendment for Hawaiian hoary bat and Hawaiian goose here. So tier 3 for Hawaiian hoary bat, tier 2 for Hawaiian goose, and tier 1 for the seabird species. Our post-construction monitoring also has 2 types of monitoring occurring: fatality monitoring and acoustic monitoring. And the strategy at KWP2 is the same as at KWP1. So we search weekly with the K9 team. We are searching the cleared areas within the 70-meter radius of the turbine, and this was also implemented in 2015, this program. We are managing the vegetation with quarterly herbicide treatments and monthly weed whacking to keep those areas, the search areas, cleared, and the scavenger control program is the same level of effort as it is at KWP1. And then our acoustic monitoring program also has 5 acoustic detectors, and these are wildlife acoustics detectors, and we monitor year round. So results for FY 2022 and through Q1. Again, very strong searcher efficiency across all size classes. And I would just point out here that this is where we're seeing an improvement in the probability of persistence based on what we believe is based on an increase in our level of scavenger control at the site. Fairly strong numbers for each of the size classes for Q2, sorry, through Q1. And for the summary of take, we've had take of 2 of the 4 covered species, the Hawaiian hoary bat and Hawaiian goose, at this project. And so our modeled numbers are based on 3 Hawaiian hoary bat and 9 nene. In FY 2022, we observed a take of 2 nene. And so our total take estimated using EOA at the 80% UCL, which also includes our adjustment or our inclusion of indirect take, is 11 Hawaiian hoary bats and 27 Hawaiian goose, which puts us into the tiers 3 and 2 respectively. And we've had, in this reporting period, we've had no detections of the MBTA covered species. Primarily, we do see black francolins, blue francolins, and African silverbills in the past, in this reporting period. Those have been, for both projects, have been the primary species that we've seen, we've had take of, or we've seen fatalities for. And then for acoustic monitoring, our percent of detector nights sampled is very similar to KWP1 at 9.2% of detector nights. We've seen activity recorded. And these were also lower than FY 2022, but not significantly so. I'm sorry, than FY 2021 and not significantly so. And that same pattern where this increase in activity in January is present here. Again, we would need more data to provide any kind of context for interpretation of that. So I'll pause for here before I jump into avoidance and minimization for both projects, or talking about both projects. Are there any questions? Okay. So avoidance and minimization in FY22 has focused on vegetation management in order to address minimizing risk to Nene on site. And so we've been working in conjunction with Maui DOFA on a plan to manage vegetation outside of the Nene breeding season to minimize the attractiveness of the on-site habitat. And this occurred this past summer, where we had some woody vegetation removal, sort of low vegetation and shrubs that we identified based on our observations of Nene that we've been tracking observations of Nene and locations throughout the site. So we identified 2 places where the most Nene observations have occurred, and worked in conjunction with, primarily with Stephanie Franklin, to create a plan that removed some of that vegetation and therefore minimized opportunities for both hiding and shade. So primarily ironwood removal was addressed. And again, that was reducing shade opportunities. And in our removal of the vegetation, we removed all debris from that so that there wasn't any other shade opportunities created by the removal of the vegetation. And in 2023, FY 2023, we are starting to minimize, or reduce, I should say, our use of herbicide applications. So we are maintaining the vegetation through, instead of trying to do quarterly herbicide applications, we are wanting to do them just twice during the fiscal year, so that we can do them outside of Nene breeding season and minimize the use of those herbicides. Additionally, we reduced some of the tall grassy vegetation along the roadsides in order to minimize the possibility of Nene flushing as trucks were moving throughout the area. And this occurs in conjunction with a low vehicle speed of 10 miles per hour on site. And then ongoing avoidance and minimization over both sites includes low wind speed curtailment, which is a similar program for both projects. So currently, low wind speed curtailment includes a 5.5 meter per second cut-in speed, which is implemented between sunset and sunrise from February 15th to December 15th annually. And so historically, this program was started in 2014 with a cut-in speed of 5.0 meters per second. And in reaction to 3 bat fatalities across both projects in late 2013 and 2014, the cut-in speed was raised to 5.5 meters per second in August of 2014. So again, currently it's at 5.5 meters per second from February 15th to December 15th. And we have not had any bat fatalities during the window where low wind speed curtailment is not active. So in other words, from December 16th to February 14th, we have not had any bat fatalities occur. So for the mitigation status, and again, because the mitigation projects are funded by both KWP1 and KWP2, I've created the mitigation per species and included both projects' contributions. So for the Hawaiian hoary bat, we are, sorry, I'm pausing because our current take at KWP1, I believe, is in with tier 1. Maybe Tom, can you check on and see if I misrepresented that in the slide? My apologies there. Our tier 1 mitigation provided funding for habitat management at Kahiki Nui State Forest Reserve, and that level of mitigation was completed. And our tier 2, we are definitely within tier 2, sorry. Our tier 2 mitigation was funding research on 2 different fronts. The H.T. Harvey Hawaiian hoary bat research covered 15 bats, and this was bat ecological research on Maui, and then a USGS study on the island of Hawaii, both with the intent to better inform future bat conservation. So this tier has been fully funded, and we anticipate the completion of the mitigation with the publication of the USGS research, which we anticipate to occur in at the end of 2023. And the projection for Hawaiian hoary bat is that we will remain below the permitted level of take for the permit term. And then for KWP, Bob?
Yeah, I got a question from Karina regarding the January, February peaks, and just wondering if in your acoustic monitoring, you're differentiating between foraging and social calls, because that might give you information on why the bats are up there, because they can use those high elevation sites during those months for both purposes.
Yeah, that's good information. We are not deciphering between the types of calls. We are just looking at the sum of activity in general. So I'm going to make a note of that.
Okay, we can follow up. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Okay, and then just jumping back into KWP2's mitigation status summary for Hawaiian hoary bat. We're currently within tier 3. The tiers 1 and 2 mitigations have been completed also at Kahiki Nui State Forest Reserve, and funding the USGS research for the ecological research, I guess, on the island of Hawaii. And so this tier will be complete with the publication of the USGS's research. And the projected take for KWP2 also suggests that we will remain not only below the total authorized amount, but within the current tier, that we won't move into tier 4 within the permit term. Okay, so for Hawaiian goose mitigation, we are currently working at the Haleakala Ranch release pen, and this is the current mitigation program for both projects. And before I talk about our work there, I'll provide a history of the mitigation for both projects. So past mitigation work for the Hawaiian goose release pens includes the projects providing funding to DOFA to manage and maintain 2 release pens, the Haleakala Ranch release pen for KWP1 and the PE Hello Ranch release pen for KWP2. And in 2021, DOFA expressed concerns that the PE Hello Ranch was no longer a viable mitigation project due to the lack of guaranteed access because the property was for sale. So DOFA recommended moving the KWP2 funding to Haleakala Ranch. And at that time, DOFA also requested that rather than the projects provide funding, that they take over the day-to-day maintenance of the Haleakala Ranch release pen. And so that has been what we have been working on for in 2022 is to finalize the scope of work and the MOU with DOFA for Brookfield to take on the management of the Haleakala Ranch release pen for both projects. So right now, we are currently awaiting DOFA's signature on the MOU for that action to be finalized. And we are working towards a pen expansion in 2023. We also recognize that the projects are falling behind on our NENE obligation, mitigation obligation. And so I'll talk about that in just a minute. Jim, I see that you have your hand raised.
Yeah, this is a question about PE Holo. So maybe this is more of a question to the agencies is what is the status of any mitigation credits that might have been provided by PE Holo? Are those still valid, or if we're back to zero and there's no predator control being maintained out there, are they still valid mitigation credits?
We have, from our perspective, we have understood that the credits that came from PE Hello were like our credit assessment currently includes those credits, but there was not any credit provided for after 2021, after we had talked about rolling KWP2 over into the Haleakala Ranch release pen. So I can only answer part of that question.
And Jim, I can't answer for DOFA, but I can answer for Fish and Wildlife Service here. So we tend to use the word credit in a bunch of different ways, but this is not a mitigation bank. And so there are no long-term credits that are sold or used like a normal mitigation bank would be. The mitigation obligation here was to do the work for those years, which they have done. So there's nothing that is happening now at PE Holo would change the value of the mitigation work that has been done thus far, at least not on the Fish and Wildlife Service side. That being said, and I think we're talking about this on Wednesday, but PE Holo was also a safe harbor area, as is Haleakala Ranch. Now, the safe harbor agreement term has ended for both of those properties, but there are legal documents between the agencies and those landowners that dictate how things have to go in accordance with the so those are the weird ones, Jim, if you remember, where the term of the safe harbor agreement actions, I think, were only 15 years, but the term of the permits associated with them were longer. I'm not going to try and remember the exact term lengths. For both of these properties, we've had to be very explicit about what happens because they're also being used as mitigation spots for HCPs. I don't have a fundamental problem with what's being proposed here, and I actually think it's probably a good idea for KWP 1 and KWP 2 to take on the management of Haleakala Ranch Pen. But, and I told this to Emma last week, I do want to make sure that this is all being done in a way that is still consistent with the Safe Harbor Agreement, which is the underlying legal document that dictates Nene conservation on those lands. Even though the term the Safe Harbor Agreement is complete, the permits, the incidental take license and the enhancement of survival permit remain in place for those properties. For DOFA, my understanding, Lainey, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that that continues with the land regardless of whether or not it is sold. For Fish and Wildlife Service, it ends if the property is sold. Jim, I don't know if that totally answered your question, but that's, yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks for that context. It is a very confusing situation. And I mean, the concern is if there was some habituation to the Pi'iholo site by the birds and if, with predator control stopping and management stopping there, that it could potentially turn into a sink and actually, give us a worse off situation than we were when you started.
I don't disagree with you, but I think that that's something that we discuss when we talk about Pi'iholo rather than for the context of this mitigation plan.
And Michelle, this is Paul Radley. I want to confirm that you are correct that the ITL for an SHA runs with the land, not the landowner under DOFA.
Thanks, Paul. But I do, when we get to this on Wednesday, I do think it's worth us talking a little bit about what happens at the end of this for Pi'iholo.
This is Loyal.
Sorry, before you start, I just want to reiterate what Michelle said at the beginning to answer Jim's question about the credits. That's the same for the state as well. Sorry, Loyal, go ahead.
That's okay. My question is, so how many Nene were produced as offsets for the HCPs, these two HCPs?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. I can look that up and get back to you on that number. And what I can say is that we not enough to stay on top of our obligation, which is why we are looking, which I'll present on the next slide, for other mitigation programs. So between the two projects, we are lagging in our mitigation credits.
I think this just points out the concern that if you link an HCP with a safe harbor with a different location like that, and particularly as you get further along in the HCP process, the timeline there, and if something happens to that safe harbor area that says they're not going to do it anymore, that could potentially really jeopardize the mitigation offsets that you're looking for. And I know it's a difficult situation, but it's something we need to really keep in mind as we're developing new HCPs and using safe harbor areas for the mitigation.
Loyal, just as a quick follow-up, I've only got the KWP1 report pulled up, but if you look in Appendix 2B for KWP1, and there should be a similar appendix for KWP2, it does have a large table, and at the bottom of that, parameter L talks about mitigation adult survival, and K, mitigation fledglings. So for KWP1, it shows as the sum of mitigation fledglings is roughly 49.69 over the life of the project through FY 2022. Don't believe that includes fledglings that were observed this last year. I'm not sure on that. And then an additional 2.65 adult adult survival credits. So you should be able to find it there.
And I have KWP2s right in front of me too. So 14.56, let's see, of that row K, so the mitigation fledglings produced, and then 1.63 for the mitigation adult survival credit. So again,
Thank you.
underscoring that we are lagging in our obligation.
Right. Thank you.
And looking to resolve that. Michelle?
Jenny, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask about the future for a second. I know that this meeting is intended to look at the annual reports in the past fiscal year, but recognizing that you are in a lag and trying to make up that value and taking on responsibility for Haleakala Ranch Pen in 2023, do you have everything that you need to make that happen? I mean, we're already in Nene season, so I just wanted to check and see if you have what you need at this point to make that work.
We have crafted a scope of work that was based on the SHA and the agreements that were outlined there and the work that was committed to in the SHA, so that it is in alignment with the SHA. Yeah. And we are, again, just waiting for finalization of the MOU with DOFA for that work at Haleakala Ranch. What we don't yet have and have been working on in this past year are opportunities like we have directions, but we have not yet found and additional mitigation projects that are identified, I should say, additional mitigation projects that will help address the lagging credit. So we are working with agencies to identify those. It is proving a little bit more difficult than it would seem. And so I guess, Tom, I'll see if you want to chime in there also.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, and you've stated it already, is that we are working towards pen expansion at Haleakala Ranch in this next breeding season. So working in the context of the existing pen through the 2022-2023 breeding season and then expanding. But we do believe that there is a need for mitigation beyond that. And, as I said, as Jenny said, we've been in discussions and really trying to identify additional opportunities and welcome agency ESRC thoughts on where we might explore in order to be able to perform additional mitigation work.
Thanks, Tom.
So just a quick summary of the status, everything I've already talked about presented here, except the projections. We, even with an adjustment, a downward adjustment of the authorized take on the ITL, where we land, we are projecting that we'd remain below the permitted level of take for the permit term. And same with KWP2. And although we are projecting that we would move from tier 2 into tier 3. Okay, now I'll move on to seabirds. Starting with Makemakaole seabird mitigation area. The Makemakaole was, as everyone knows, was originally established to provide mitigation for both Newell's Shearwater and Hawaiian petrel for both projects. but only Newell Shearwater have established a breeding colony on site. So I'm going to talk about Makamakua'ole in the context of Newell Shearwater mitigation. So in the past few years, Brookfield has partnered with Maui Nui Seabird Recovery Project for work at Makamakua'ole for managing the site and the mitigation actions, which include predator exclusion fencing, trapping in and outside of the enclosures. There are 2 enclosures. We added sand to burrow box substrate in 2021 to address a rougher substrate that we had concern that was causing some egg breakage. And burrow monitoring and vegetation management are also occurring or have occurred in this past year or throughout our time there. And then through 2020, we had a social attraction program and natural sound environment for reach and have altered that to be a natural sound environment for the past 2 breeding seasons. And so in 2021, we had our first fully fledged chick, and we had a second fully fledged chick in the 2022 breeding season. And this is a picture of it. This picture is from October 7th of this year. And the established Newell Shearwater colony continued to grow with most activity focused in enclosure A in this past year. And primary results from the 2022 breeding season made clear that the mitigation obligation for both projects was fulfilled. And we're working with Maui Nui Seabird Recovery Program towards their final report, and that should allow us to fine tune any adjustments to the final credit assessment based on the findings over the year. But we do believe that we have met the mitigation obligation for the species for both projects. So I'll just do a summary of that status. We provided funding for FY 2020 for the 2022 breeding season for both, and we believe the mitigation obligation has been fulfilled pending final review of the report for for 2022. Our mitigation obligation combined over both projects was 6.681 adult equivalents, and we believe that we've achieved 8.543 credits and exceeding our obligation, including the 2 fledglings. Tom, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
The only thing I'll add is just a clarification that in these last 2 years, they have continued to do the petrol callbacks, acoustic environment, but we're just relying on Newell Shearwaters to make their own environment. And we haven't seen petrels on the ground, I think, since 2017.
So once again, this is Loyal with a question.
Okay.
So we've had 2 fledglings, right?
Yes, 1 each year.
1 each year, which is great. Thank you. So how is that translating into your mitigation quote unquote credits on the page that's showing right now?
Tom, do you want to?
Sure.
Take that
Yeah.
one?
So in the predator excluded breeding environment, the adults are coming in and are protected from predation. So the HCP sort of described adult survival changes in different environments. So predator exclusion versus high predation rates. And so those were framed in the original HCP and used to calculate increased adult survival benefits for the adults that were documented as occupying the breeding colony for the majority of each breeding season since they initially occupied it. So that increased adult survival over the time frame of the mitigation site accumulated enough credits to make up for the the difference that you're looking at there.
Thank you.
Sure.
So based on what was not happening at Makamaku'ole, we, for Hawaiian Petrel, we adaptively managed our mitigation to Paluma Lanai and created a Hawaiian Petrel mitigation there, working in conjunction with Paluma Lanai. And so we provided funding, Brookfield provided funding in 2021 and again in 2022. And the 2022 management area included this greater Hi'i area, and the actions that were funded were predator control and burrow monitoring. And these, the triangles or the diamonds here are the burrows in 2020, which are also reflected. So this is not the most current, but the burrows are fairly similar in 2022. And so for Hawaiian Petrel mitigation status, based on our results of at Paluma Lanai, we are currently working with agencies on assessing the mitigation credit for the 2022 breeding season. But preliminary results from this project indicate that the mitigation obligation will have been fulfilled for both projects in this breeding season too. And KWP1 has some potential to move from tier 1 to tier 2 by the end of the permit term. And so we've included two numbers for a combined mitigation obligation for both projects. One which includes KWP1 remaining in tier 1, and one which includes KWP2 moving into tier 2. And in either scenario, the anticipated credits from this breeding season should place us well in range of meeting the mitigation obligation. And Tom, I'll just invite you to add anything to that you'd like to.
Yeah, I would just highlight that we did work through with both DOFA and Fish and Wildlife Service a mitigation framework for calculating the benefits at this site for the 2021 data. So this framework was then applied to the preliminary data that we have from 2022, and the most conservative assumption of that data still gets us that 66.22 credits at the end of 2022. So we felt very confident that regardless of sort of the path that these two projects follow, that the mitigation obligation has been fulfilled, and we've shared that right up with the agencies and are just sort of awaiting that, in addition to providing them, once Paluma Lanai gets the 2022 breeding season together, a final report to document the findings. But we do have and have shared a preliminary report that we believe provides this justification for understanding from the regulatory agencies as well as Brookfield that the mitigation obligation has been fulfilled this year or this last year.
So then moving on to agency coordination and adaptive management in this year. We've primarily been coordinating with both agencies on mitigation programs. And so we coordinated with Maui DOFA for the vegetation removal. And then for addressing the Haleakala Ranch, working towards identifying viable other mitigation obligations for Nene, adaptively managing to Lanai, and then for Newell Shearwater, assessing the mitigation credit. These are all items that we have been in consultation with agencies on over the course of the past year and a half. And then that takes me to future plans, which I've mentioned all at some point. So expansion of the Haleakala Ranch. And so, future plans more on the immediate work towards identifying Nene, addressing Nene mitigation. So expansion of the Haleakala Ranch release pen and finding other mitigation programs for the Hawaiian goose. We plan on working with DOFA to transition Makamaka'ole over to their care and the management over to DOFA. We are looking at, through observational data, the effectiveness of the on-site vegetation management to see if it can inform any future, potential future efforts after this breeding season. And then we will also be doing our compliance and monitoring based on the HCP requirements. So post-construction mortality monitoring and bat acoustic monitoring and reporting. And so I'll just pause there to see if there are other questions that people have, or maybe from the public.
We'll start with questions from the committee first, and then we'll go to the public. Thanks. Any more committee questions?
Just one. If I heard your presentation correctly, this was the last year that you were working with Pulama Lanai, is that correct?
We anticipate meeting the obligation this year. So
or
yes, intent, barring no unforeseen circumstances. Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Any more questions or recommendations from the committee?
I guess I'd maybe like to hear a status update on the stuff going on with Nene sometime in maybe this upcoming summer. It doesn't need to be long, and obviously as Fish and Wildlife Service, I'm likely to get that update anyway, but I also think that might be valuable for the ESRC to see an update on it more broadly. And I don't want that to be seen as a punitive measure. I just think that there's enough going on with this, and transitioning from DOFA to Brookfield is a pretty big shift. Going from Pi'i Holo to Haleakala Ranch is a pretty big shift. There's already a lag in mitigation. I just think that it's worth us continuing to pay attention to this one and make sure that y'all have what you need and that we have what we need from an agency decision-making standpoint.
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that. Thanks for bringing that up, Michelle. And I think it is important because it seems like a lot of the discussions are now happening much more with the agencies rather than with ESRC. And it would be good to get our input in on some of those key issues too. That's the whole purpose of the ESRC in the first place, is to bring in biological recommendations or perspectives in terms of HCPs and safe harbors, rather than just simply being a rubber stamp group that passes things on to the board. So I appreciate trying to get more of that information to the ESRC before any decisions or any preliminary decisions are made.
Tom, I think I also heard you say that, there is still this ongoing conversation about what additional Nene mitigation could be employed. And I know that that's been a pretty challenging conversation to have on Maui. That might be another area where we want to dig a little deeper and see if there's anything that we can bring in either from NRAG or from the ESRC members to help identify additional opportunities.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Michelle and Jim. Yeah, I I agree, and I I guess I want to emphasize that, you know, the more quickly that we can get that kind of information integrated and start exploring what additional options there might be, I think the better. You know, obviously we're in a tight timeline, particularly with the permit term coming up for KWP1, but you know, these, and I think if we can resolve this in a, you know, an efficient manner, figuring out a solution for KWP1 that can translate into solutions for KWP2, because it has a little bit more time to address that. But yeah, any help that we can have from the agencies, the ESRC, you know, if you have ideas today or in the near future and can translate or transmit those to DOFA staff and let them trickle down to us, I think, you know, I don't want to, I guess, step away from this meeting, regroup in, you know, 5 months and have had solutions that we weren't looking at because we haven't had that communication. So I just want to keep those channels open and encourage, you know, sharing of information or ideas to help us resolve this.
To be honest, Tom, I think I've got a couple of ideas, but I'm hesitant to share any of them without Maui DOFA in the room. And
Understood.
so I would prefer to have John or Stephanie present before throwing out something that may or may not be feasible or implementable or supported by DOFA.
Absolutely appreciate it.
Sorry, one last thing. And this hopefully, it sounds like this is on the road to getting resolved, but is there any follow-up actions that need to happen related to that tier 2 thing that you need from ESRC, or is that just getting handled by the agencies and everything should be fine there?
The one question that I had was for myself, is if I had put us in the wrong tier of bat take for KWP1, but that was just a memory error on my part. So I don't see that there's any issues right now. And so I'm not sure how to respond.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything that we need from agencies for bat take authorization, or you know, it's just the NENE ITL and working through that, which is the other part of NENE items that we are working on with agencies.
Got it. Sorry. And when I said that, I think I meant NENE. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So we are still, you know, in frequent communication with agencies on assessing what our upward amount will be, and we're also, you know, working on what mitigation would look like, and therefore the ideas for NENE other viable mitigation options are totally welcome, as Tom I already identified.
Got it. Thank you.
Do we have any questions or comments from any members of the public?
No comments or questions.
Okay, thanks, Mina.
Okay, well, I guess that will end my presentation. Thank you very much. And yeah, appreciate everybody's time.
We appreciate the presentation. Thanks for being here.
Let's take a 5-minute break before we move on to the next agenda item, and if you can be back at, sorry, 10:30 a.m. Thank you. All right, can I just check to see if we've got enough, we've got all our board members, our committee members, sorry. If you can, if you're a member of the committee, can you turn on your camera? I have Michelle. Thank you. Do we have Loyal and Jim? Jim, hi. Just waiting for Loyal. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, we can move on to our next agenda item. Mina, if you can introduce that. Thanks.
So George Chakal from Tetra Tech, he will be presenting a status of the Oahe Wind Energy Habitat Conservation Plan. George, I made you a co-host, so you should be able to share screen now.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is George Akal. I am the project biologist at Hawaii and Wind Energy, and I work for the owner is American Electric Power. That's who I work for. And yeah, I'm here to answer any questions the ESRC, are mainly to hopefully get some recommendations from the ESRC members today on our annual report. And yeah, look forward to hearing from you guys.
So I want to just, are we not doing a presentation?
I think the report is online. I can pop it up if you guys want to look at it. Or Marina, if you want to bring up the annual report and look at that. Get some recommendations on it. Be lovely.
You can share your screen. I think you have a better idea of where everything is. So you should be able to share the annual report.
All right, yeah. If you guys want to look at anything in particular or take or
George, this is Jim. I mean, you know, typically for our annual review, we do have a presentation and sort of highlighting all the the accomplishments and the problems and so forth. And that sort of is a stimulus for us to be able to respond and bring input in. I mean, there are a couple of things that are really concerning that I think several of us have noted in terms of the high take of bats and so forth. And so I think those are some of the issues that I think really we need to be talking about.
Hey, Jim, this is Matt Stelmach. I'm the environmental permitting manager for AEP. I support George on this project. We have spent significant time preparing presentations in the past and just haven't seen that the ESRC members have reviewed the annual reports. And so we wanted to focus on the annual report itself. We've spent some time reviewing the language of 195D section 25, which doesn't necessarily put the obligation on the applicants to spend so much time, but it requests that the ESRC review the Habitat Conservation Plan, Safe Harbor Agreements, incidental take licenses on an annual basis. So we just wanted to be present to respond to the questions of your review rather than spend the considerable time it takes to prepare these presentations annually.
Hi, this is Kate. I wanted to point something out that while, yes, the ESRC is responsible and does review the annual reports, these presentations and these annual review meetings are for the benefit of the public as well. And we don't usually expect them to get a personal deep dive into the annual reports that are written and posted. We expect them to get the basics from the presentations by each permittee.
Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this happened last year too. And in that ESRC annual review meeting, during that discussion, I think that we said we do expect a presentation and we do expect it to cover these basic things. Do you recall that as well?
I don't recall. I believe last year Wahi prepared a presentation.
Okay, maybe that is just my.
Michelle, it was, I think it was for the second day of the presentations when we were talking about some of the safe harbors and some of the other projects with some of the seabird projects. And with one exception, none of them had presentations. And I think the ESRC very strongly recommended a presentation.
Can I ask Lainey or Paul, when this meeting invite went out for these meetings, was there any criteria or expectations outlined in the request?
This is Paul. Yes, there was. We sent a template for them to follow. They did put a presentation together last year as well. Quite
Thanks.
nice.
I can, just to, if you guys want to have some presentation, I can share my screen. I know, Jim, you had a question about the take. If you want to do it like that, or you guys want to, if you guys want me to present something, I have the annual report to share.
I guess what I'm looking for is and this is what we've had in the past from you and from others is again a summary of things that have been accomplished, status of where things are relative to the license and the take permits, as well as any kinds of concerns and issues that have come up. And again, the purpose of the ESRC is to help provide biological input in. It's not just simply to say, okay, yes, we heard, we read the report, check. It's to provide that input into there. And particularly in this case here, one of the big concerns that has constantly come up is the high level of bat take, and having a discussion to see if there are some opportunities to see what can be done to minimize that or alleviate that. So yes, it is very important. This is an important meeting, and one of the roles of the SRC as put out in the statute is to review annually and determine whether progress is being made. This is what we're trying to do.
Jim, yeah, I share that concern. The bat take levels, as you can see, they're pretty consistent with the past years. They are, projected. We're still projected to stay within our permitted levels. In the annual report, it talks about our tier 5 planning and what we've done for tier 5. It also sums up what we've done for tier 4, sums up a lot of the research that has been performed over the last year. So yeah, I think a lot of those
George,
are
sorry, you're skimming through it really fast, and it's also really small. So just want to let you know, us and the public can't really read what you're showing us. If you can go back.
Yeah, I can refer to it, but it's all public. You guys posted on the state website. Maybe you can share that link and I can refer to the pages. But yeah, the take levels can be found on page 7, and you can see up to the annual report it was 4, and our cumulative direct take estimate was 70, and indirect take was estimated at 8 there. But yeah, if you want to look at the concern there, compared to years past, it's pretty consistent. Also in the report, we talk about our adaptive management and what we've done to minimize and avoid impacts as much as we can. And one of those measures was you can see in this report, also in this table, it calls out low wind speed curtailment was a big minimization measure that was implemented. You can see it was implemented here in year 5, 2017, or curtailment, sorry here, 2016 or 2015 to 5 meters per second. 6.9 was in 2019. We've installed bat deterrents. Here's 6, and we sum up the results of the, our that adaptive management plan and what's being proposed in the coming year. It's all in this report here. I can make it bigger, but sorry, I was looking at page 7. I can look. I'm gonna go down to page 8 or 14. Some of the mitigation summary here. What's completed, what's ongoing. Pumakua, you see in the picture. Right there.
Hang on, George. Before we move on to mitigation, I just want to acknowledge Jim's concern about bat take, and we certainly share that concern. We have been doing everything in our power to minimize bat take, and to that end, like George said, we have implemented low wind speed curtailment, which is kind of a common industry practice in terms of minimizing take for bats. Part of the HCP amendment was to implement the adaptive management plan, which George has pulled up here. Additionally, we increased the low wind speed curtailment cut-in speed for the high bat activity season, that August, September, October timeframe. And we've been working with the agencies on identifying appropriate next steps. And the next step of adaptive management for us is the removal of the Met Tower, which likely is associated with unusually high geographic bat take around turbine 6. And because the relative rates are so small, even 1 or 2 bats can influence that bat fatality rate. So anything we can do to reduce is significant. The other item that we're struggling with a bit is that deterrents have not had the effect that we would have hoped they would have had. Rather than having a significant decrease in bat fatality rate, we've seen a non-significant increase in bat fatality rates after installation of deterrents. And that's concerning for us because it was a big commitment in the HCP amendment. And we don't want to continue implementing a minimization measure if it's not having the intended effect. But certainly there is a lot of concern about modifying the commitments that we've put into the HCP amendment. So I would be open to hear if this committee has had insights into new bat minimization measures, effective alternatives to low wind speed curtailment, or new technologies that could prove fruitful in effectively minimizing bat fatalities.
George,
I think one of the challenges is the fact that you really have no way of gauging whether the deterrents are working or not. It's possible that if you didn't have the deterrents in place right now, your take would even be higher. And I think that's a challenge. So I'd be very cautious about considering not keeping up the deterrent technology at your site at this point.
Agreed. I would be very interested in doing a control treatment test of deterrent effectiveness at Oahe. But certainly that would be subject to the review and approval by DOFA and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, because it would represent a change from our current minimization standards. To me, I think the best way to test the effectiveness of deterrence would to do kind of a week by week test, randomized block trial where we have all the turbines on or off and see if that results in any measurable change. The biggest challenge with measuring bat fatality rates and the effects of minimization measures is the small sample sizes that we observe. With in some years, 1 or 2 bats observed, it's hard to determine if 1 or 2 bats is a change from the baseline, or and then getting statistical significance for that may take time.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important. I mean, we do have sort of a comparison situation with Kauailoa versus Oahe, and where they have deployed at Kauailoa, the bat deterrents. I think it's the same model that you're using. they seem to have unbelievable success there versus what you're seeing at Oahe. And in talking with Marcus Gorison, it's possible that you just may have a different ecological setting there in the fact that the Oahe towers are very stand out on the landscape as very prominent features, whereas at Papailoa, it's a different situation where you have the towers are mix in with forest patches and things like that. So it may be the bats are relating very differently to that landscape and the towers. I think it is important to try and determine whether there's a difference that's happening there in terms of bat behavior. And I agree. I think it would be very useful to have a study that looks at both of those sites and monitors not only just acoustically, but particularly with thermal imaging to see whether there's any behavioral differences between how the bats are relating to the towers at one site versus the other. So I think that may be a helpful way of trying to come up with a better understanding as to why we're getting such a dramatic difference between those two sites.
We have collected a considerable amount of thermal imagery data, and we've had it analyzed by USGS, by WEST, and by Wildlife Imaging Systems. One of the challenges that we face is that because fatalities are such rare events, it's hard to associate those fatalities with any environmental conditions to say with certainty, like at the time of death, these were the conditions, these were the wind speeds, this is the behavior the bat was exhibiting, was flying either from the lee to the, windward side of the turbine, or it was approaching from upwind. There were or were not insects present. There's a lot of covariates that could be important that we just don't know many of the covariates that are associated with risk to bats or risk to bats of collision with the turbine. Most of what we're doing is associating activity with risk, but I think that's a pretty coarse tool.
Yeah, no, a big difference between Oahu and the Maui side is you just look at the, bat activity, the levels, the acoustic monitoring levels, it's, it's pretty high compared to those Oahu sites. So we have a lot of bat activity year round. I do think the mitigation is working, and we are doing good for the bats, and, potentially more bats in the landscape means, potentially more impacts to those bats. But, I think a benefit and the looking at those levels and the population of, the bats on this side of the island, leeward or East Maui is pretty healthy if you look at those acoustic monitoring results, and you want to use that as a, indicator of the population or the health of the population. So, and we've done a lot of those studies. We collected a lot of the data you can see in this annual report, Tier 4, also, Kamehamehanui, Leeward Haleakala. So, a lot of bad activity. But I with if you guys have recommendations, yeah, I think USGS, you guys looked at ultraviolet light most recently, and didn't seem like that worked out as expected. You can see a lot of the research out is different impacts with the different species of bats with the acoustic deterrence. We have a study in here that shows some of those differences. Oahu and Maui, we have some comparison there. So what we've been looking at more is what we can do to the system, and not necessarily turn it off, is how we can maximize and get the best benefit out of the system, turn it on if the bats are around, or if we're missing anything. And the thermal data we're trying to get, and we're trying to use that to inform when we use these deterrents, or low wind speed curtailment, or anything that we can do to minimize the risk to these bats in the area. And yeah, like we reported on, worked with DOFA and the service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife over the last year to propose this Met Tower removal as an option. And we do think removing the Met Tower is going to have some, removing some attractiveness to the site or something, to the turbines, and hopefully reduce take at our site.
Are you finding any of the sites, in any of the towers particularly, are the more ones that are attractive to bats and more of your fatalities there? I know that it's hard to tell at some points, but is there any information now that you have more data?
Yeah, we did an analysis by turbine, and we were having more fatalities at our higher elevation turbines, with the exception of turbine 6, which had a similar fatality rate to those turbines 1 and 2, which seemed to stand out. When you look at the site as a whole, the site is relatively small in the grand scheme of things, and so geographic variation, there may be limits to the geographic variation or geographic analysis that we could do, but 1, 2, and 6 here, George has pulled up on page 8 of our adaptive management plan that the disproportionate number of fatalities are observed at turbines 1, 2, and 6, which account for 73% of the observed fatalities. But we have observed fatalities at each of our project turbines.
Matt and George, I just want to make sure that I got the numbers right. So for FY22, it was 10 observed bats, but 3 of those were incidental or outside the search area or the search timeline. And if I'm looking at the right information, there are 4 bats since the beginning of fiscal year 2023. Is that accurate?
Just a second while George is pulling up our numbers, but
okay.
The analysis for Oahe also doesn't coincide with the fiscal years. We have followed the calendar years, which has made these fiscal year reports a little bit challenging.
It says to June 2022. So do you have any information after that from July 2022 onwards?
Yeah, we, the most recent take, we have submitted just to take letter, and we're looking at our estimates. We informed the agencies. We in the last adjusted take letter, we were in tier 5, so it was 81 back then, or I think is tier 5, and our current is about 82 up to this year.
The estimate.
So yeah, you can see, and we're still running the analysis. Those are preliminary estimates, but yeah, if you look at their take 78 at June and 82 now. Preliminary.
I have a question. So it says 2022 there was 4 detected, but the cumulative direct take estimate went from 67 to 70, but only 3. And that doesn't take into account that's not detected.
Yeah, you get, it's not a full year once again, Amy, real quick.
Right,
So,
but
this is a full year.
It's 4, but yeah, I get that, only 4, but then the cumulative direct take went up by only 3.
Part of that is that it's accounting for the portion of the year. So part of this is the estimation process, which the divisor accounts for, searched area, searcher efficiency, carcass persistence. And then if you have only partial years, it can adjust that fatality estimate.
But shouldn't it be higher? Why is it lower?
Yeah, it's higher. It's like I said, it's cumulative right now is 74 about estimate. So,
but it says 70. in the table?
For the half year, yeah. For the full year, I'm giving you the preliminary.
So you've got, sorry, there's that bottom row, 2022,
2020.
you've got four bats detected so far for calendar year 22, but your cumulative take only went up by 3. Why is it less?
One of those, I believe, is incidental.
I see. Okay.
Look back
And
at
that
the table.
number 70 is pending because it's only half a year, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry,
Sorry.
yeah, here it is.
Okay.
Sorry, George, I think I might still be slow on the numbers here, but I think where we stand right now, we're somewhere in the low 80s. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Somewhere in that general vicinity. And tier 5 started at 81.
Yeah, we've exceeded our tier 4 authorization.
So we're in tier 5. Tier 5 is not being implemented yet because it's still in process. Is that correct?
We're waiting for final approval from U.S. Fish and Wildlife and DOFA on that mitigation plan.
And tier 5 takes you up to what level? What total take number of that?
I think it's an additional 30 something.
Is the ESRC going to see the mitigation plan?
The HCP calls out approval by DOFA and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but not the ESRC.
I guess I'm asking the agencies. Do you not want any biological input in from the ESRC on those?
The intent was, yes, you would get to see it, but we were waiting until it was finished. In other words, until we had our input in on it.
And Michelle, it goes up to 115 is the tier 5 limit. And you know, we've implemented some measures for tier 4. The mitigation, the letter of credit gets submitted at 75%, and then we've begun our pre-baseline monitoring as outlined in the mitigation plan.
It has taken us longer than anticipated to finalize a mitigation plan. We actually started drafting this mitigation plan well ahead of our 75% threshold, just to try and get ahead of the curve. We know that multi-agency discussions take time, and we wanted to allow for that discussion, but it has still taken more time than anticipated.
Yeah, about 2 years and 4 drafts submitted so far. So hopefully we get it approved this next round.
I guess the reason why I bring it up, you guys, is just because given this rate of take, oh my gosh, I mean, I'm thinking we maybe need to start talking about tier 6.
We had
agree,
originally
Michelle.
included in our mitigation plan, we had originally included tier 6, but it seemed to complicate the discussion. And so we pulled tier 6 out of our mitigation plan to simplify and focus on the problem at hand. But our intent is that once we finalize that tier 5 mitigation plan, that we begin discussions on tier 6.
Yeah, Michelle's in our original, proposed draft and outlined in our amendment that tier 5/6 would be on Kamihami Nui, but we've just been running into a lot of issues getting this plan going. So yeah, anything you guys can do to get this approval, or if you guys need some ESRC, I think, like Matt said, it's just DOFA and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service approval is what we need. And we've been working with Lance currently and the current leasee to continue our monitoring on the lands. We've gone up there recently with DOFA and last year to help out with some Hawaiian petrel monitoring or checking out some of the burrows up at the top, and talked a lot with Lance on what he would like to see with these lands, and try to make it align with DOFA Maui's goals. And yeah, and aid everyone. Paul was a big help. Moving forward, whoever takes over can make that decision and work out, approval. And, the next step is getting a MOU on the property. So yeah, Michelle, you're right. We're in tier 5, and in the plan, we have a timeline, and it's a draft. It can be updated, but we do, have some steps to take. We purchased some acoustic monitors to, hopefully put out acoustic detectors soon. We've seen that ponds are very beneficial to bats, and we're hoping to get some agreements with, these landowners and this landowner, and create some bat habitat pond on the land.
The goal overall is for us to be prepared to implement as soon as we have that agreement in hand. We want to be prepared as we can without overcommitting on a plan that has yet to be approved. We could spend a lot of money, but if we don't get that approval, none of that spend would be credited as mitigation. So we need to get buy-in from all the parties involved.
And I hope we continue it. Like you said, Michelle, once tier 5 gets approved, we're projected tier 6 before permit term ends, and hopefully we can get a tier 6 plan ready before we need to implement tier 6. Sorry, Jim. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, can I request that we go briefly into an executive session? I've got some issues I want to talk internally. We haven't done this before, but I want to know if that's part of the process we can do, because I think we do have the opportunity to go into executive session.
I don't think we have our AGs online, but
I'm the AG online.
Oh, you did. Oh, sorry.
Meeting. Sorry. Hi.
Is that part of our process? We can briefly go into executive session just to talk among the agencies?
Yes, you can go into executive session to discuss legal matters with me if needed. You'll need to do it by motion.
I move we go into executive session to discuss a few issues relating to the annual review process.
Anyone
Does
second?
anyone know how that works? Do we just pause the YouTube thing and boot everybody else off of
I
Zoom?
believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, you can make a chat or like a separate discussion room on Zoom. Whoever has the control right now, that would work.
Okay, let me.
Yeah, we need a second first, I believe. Does someone want a second?
I can second.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Sorry, and we'll just wait for the chat room. Thanks, Nina.
So will you walk us through the process of what we need to do?
Yeah, I think there'll be something pop up. Says Mina wants you to join this room, I believe.
Do you know how to do that, Lainey?
I don't, sorry. I'm not very familiar with Zoom.
Loyal, I see you talking, but we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I failed to hit my other unmute button. So just doing a motion and a second doesn't make it happen. Do we have to vote on that to do that? I can't remember my Robert's rules.
Yeah, sorry. I think you may actually need to vote. So yes, you should vote now that you've seconded it.
Okay, I vote yes. Yeah, hand up.
I will vote yes as well.
Okay. So that's unanimous.
So if we simply pause the recording,
Yeah.
does that